Superman and the Fantastic Four are hitting theaters just 14 days apart, so they're going to be battling it out at the box office. One of these two behemoths is bound to be the biggest hit of the year, and they're both battling for the fans' love. This showdown could shape the future of the whole genre, because Superman's got the job of selling us on the rest of the DCU. And the Fantastic Four need to convince us to go watch Doomsday and Secret Wars. But which one is going to win this epic face-off? Today we're going to compare these two movies in 4 categories to figure out which one fans are going to like more, and which one's going to bring in more juicy cash. I'll give a point to the winner of each category, and whoever ends up with the most points by the end of the video will be the winner.
Let's go, let's go, let's go!
The first category is how popular the characters are. This one's super important for the box office because lately a lot of people only go to the movies if they know the characters. It's no coincidence that the biggest hits after Endgame were No Way Home and Deadpool and Wolverine, where some of the most popular superheroes ever showed up. Meanwhile, a really good movie like Thunderbolts didn't even make its budget back, just because the main characters weren't that well known. Here it looks like Superman and the Fantastic Four are pretty even, since they're classic heroes who were super important to each publisher's history. Superman is the first superhero ever, and the genre wouldn't even exist without him. He's one of the most iconic characters in pop culture, and he's known and loved by people of all ages, from all over the world. He became such a huge symbol that even folks who don't care about superheroes still recognize his logo and know his story. That's why he's never fallen out of the top 5 most popular superheroes in the world, even in years when he didn't have a movie of his own. Even the news talked about the death of Superman back in 1992, like it was a real-world event. The Fantastic Four are kind of similar, since they've got some amazing stories that changed the game for sci-fi. Plus, their comics introduced a ton of major Marvel characters, like Black Panther, Uatu, Silver Surfer, and the Inhumans. This is also where key ideas for the whole universe first appeared, like the Kree-Skrull War and the Negative Zone. Even though it didn't make headlines on TV, issue number 60 of the Fantastic Four, published in 2022, sold over 700,000 copies. That comic made it into the top 6 best-selling comics in history. But sadly, their impact outside of comics just isn't the same. This group's never had a live-action movie that really did them justice. They've never been a box office hit like Superman, and on top of that, they totally disappeared after 2015. After this flop that nobody liked, they were gone from animated shows, video games, and even the comics. Marvel actually canceled their main regular series for 3 years because of the rights issues with Fox, and because the comics weren't selling well. We didn't get new Fantastic Four comics again until 2018, and they only just recently showed up outside the comic book world in Marvel Rivals. But that's not enough to match the cultural presence that Superman has. This guy is trending on social media anytime there's a leaked photo or some tweet by James Gunn gets taken out of context. The Man of Steel's had a way bigger presence in movies, and he's all over the place right now. There's Superman and Lois on CW, My Adventures with Superman on HBO, and he even showed up in some video games. But don't get me wrong, I know the Fantastic Four have a super loyal fan base that's been waiting decades for a proper adaptation, so their movie might pull in strong numbers on opening weekend. But it's going to be really tough for it to have the same cultural impact or buzz that Superman's going to have. This film's been trending ever since Gunn announced the reboot. Maybe the Fantastic Four can catch up and become just as popular as Superman in the next few years if this live action is amazing and their future appearances hit the mark. But for now, the point for popularity goes to Superman.
I beat you!
Of course, that's not the only thing that matters. If just being popular guaranteed box office success, then Superman Returns would have made more than Iron Man 1, and that wasn't the case. That brings us to the second category, the track record of each studio. Since these two movies are part of bigger cinematic universes, we've got to look at how past projects were received. If you think this doesn't matter, just remember how Ant-Man 2 made $600 million, thanks to the hype from Infinity War and Endgame. The MCU was in a great place and people were super hyped. On the flip side, a universe with a bad rep can tank any movie. Just look at Sony's Spider-Man-less universe. Every movie they dropped after Morbius turned into a meme, and people just didn't want to see them in theaters because the whole universe was a mess. So where do DC and Marvel stand right now? The MCU isn't in that phase anymore where they could toss anything into theaters, and fans would rush to see it just because it had the Marvel logo. If it were, Brave New World would have made way more than $400 million. Thunderbolts wouldn't have lost money, and Born Again wouldn't have missed Nielsen's top 10, which tracks weekly viewership on TV and streaming platforms. But that doesn't mean fans are unhappy. Marvel still dropped some awesome stuff lately, like X-Men 97, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and Deadpool and Wolverine. The problem is, they've kind of lost the casual audience. Still, their numbers are way ahead of DC's.
Is that so?
After the pandemic, Marvel's only had 3 box office flops: Quantumania, The Marvels, and Thunderbolts, and 2 of those were just a few million short of being profitable. But out of DC's last 10 movies, only 1 actually made money, and most got slammed by critics and fans. The Joker franchise is done. The old DCU is dead and buried. Batman's the only character that sells tickets, and the fan base is completely split. But it's not all bad news. This past year, DC's done some really good stuff. Fans got emotional with the end of Superman and Lois. Season 2 of My Adventures with Superman was a hit on HBO Max. The Penguin became one of the best superhero shows ever, and Creature Commandos totally blew expectations out of the water. You could say this doesn't really count, since only one of those projects is actually connected to the new DCU, and everything else happens in different universes. But the key thing is that the DC brand is bouncing back. A few years ago, people would run the other way if they saw that white and blue logo. But now, DC Studios is starting to stand for quality. That doesn't mean people are gonna pack theaters to see Superman just because they like the Penguin, but at least no one's embarrassed to say they're a DC fan anymore. So, I'd say this category is a tie. Marvel's still leading when it comes to box office, since even their worst projects make more money than DC's. But if we're talking about quality and how fans reacted, DC's recent stuff got way more love. So it's more money versus more fan love, which means the fair call is to give 1 point to each for the studio track record. By the way, if you're enjoying this, don't forget to subscribe and steer clear of cheap knockoffs. I've got plenty more versus videos coming up. The third category is the actors. It's not really about who's hotter or who looks more like the comic book characters. I know that last part might be tough to hear, but let's be real. Pedro Pascal doesn't exactly look like Reed Richards, and people still accepted him once they saw him suited up as Mr. Fantastic. What really matters is their charisma, acting skills, and star power. Basically, how many people would go to the movies just because they're in it? If you think this doesn't matter, then go ahead and tell me the last time a superhero movie with a bunch of unknown actors became a box office hit. All the Avengers movies, Spider-Man, Deadpool, and even the latest Batman had big name stars who were already well established. If actors' faces didn't sell tickets, Marvel wouldn't have dropped $80 million to get Robert Downey Jr. back in the MCU.
That's a lot of money.
These two casts couldn't be more different. James Gunn went with younger, lesser-known actors who looked just like their comic book versions. Except maybe Nathan Fillion, who might be a bit old to play Guy Gardner, the rest look spot on. If Superman does well, it could launch a bunch of these actors into stardom, because they've got the potential. But right now, nobody in the Superman cast has real star power. David Corenswet is almost a total unknown, and hasn't been nominated for anything major. Skylar Gisondo did a solid job in Licorice Pizza, but he's never had a major role in a big project. Anthony Carrigan crushed it in Barry, but people might not even recognize him with all the makeup. Rachel Brosnahan has more of a track record, since she's won a bunch of awards for The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. But for now, she's still seen as a TV star, not a big Hollywood name. The most well-known name is Nicholas Hoult, who's a good actor, but he's not as popular as Tom Cruise or Dwayne Johnson. I believe all of these guys have the potential to be amazing and become icons. Cavill was also a nobody before Man of Steel, and now fans love the guy so much they'll watch him build a PC. But as of now, they're not big names. Someone might say that's actually a good thing, because people going to see Superman will be doing it for the characters, not just because they're fans of the actors. But having more famous faces would definitely help with the box office, especially with casual audiences. On top of that, a lot of fans are still mourning the death of the old DCU, so they're going to compare these new actors with the old ones they'd already gotten attached to. Some Cavill fans will probably nitpick every little thing Corenswet does, just to say he's not as good as the previous Superman. Same thing happened when Pattinson replaced Ben Affleck as Batman, and before that, when Affleck replaced Christian Bale.
It will happen again.
That's not going to happen with the Fantastic Four, because the last time we saw this group on the big screen was 10 years ago in a terrible movie that nobody liked. No one is going to compare Pedro Pascal to Miles Teller just to make the new Reed Richards look bad. Teller's a great actor, but nobody really fell in love with his version of Mr. Fantastic, mainly because the material he had to work with was awful. The only possibly controversial casting choice is Julia Garner as Silver Surfer, but it's not about her talent. She's won 3 Emmys and a Golden Globe for Ozark, so you know she's got the skills. The issue is that Marvel decided to use Shala Bal, the female herald from Earth X, instead of introducing Norrin Rad. But this isn't even close to the drama over Superman's recasting, because Silver Surfer isn't the main character of the film. Plus, it's forgivable, since this movie takes place in a different universe. It's only a matter of time before Marvel brings in the usual Silver Surfer for the 616 universe. But the key thing is that Marvel took a different approach to casting. Instead of betting on rising stars, Marvel went with actors who are already well known, proven, and recently on a hot streak. Pedro Pascal is Hollywood's heartthrob right now. He's played all your favorite characters and has a bunch of nominations from critics groups, like the Critics' Choice Awards. Anyone into geeky stuff recognizes his face because he's been everywhere. Vanessa Kirby got an Oscar nomination and boosted her fame thanks to the Mission Impossible franchise. Joseph Quinn blew up after Stranger Things and became a fan favorite among teens and people in their 20s and 30s, which is exactly Marvel's target audience. I'm not worried he'll just play the same charming guy role to make your girlfriend fall in love with him again. He already proved he's got range in A Quiet Place Day 1, where he had to bring his A game to hold his own next to Lupita Nyong'o. If he wasn't good, it would have really stood out. And Eben Moss Bachrach won the Emmy for Best Supporting Actor in The Bear. He might not be as famous to the general public, but again, he's already shown what he's capable of. There's just no contest here. The Fantastic Four have a huge advantage, so the point goes to Marvel's first family. And now we've got the fourth category, the most important one of all, the quality of the movie. None of the stuff we've talked about matters if one of these movies turns out to be great and the other one sucks. Superman might lead the box office on opening weekend thanks to the character's popularity, but if the story sucks, word's gonna get out, and the numbers will crash hard the following week. And let's be real, what we really care about is having a great time at the movies with an awesome adaptation of these characters. Like I said at the beginning, money isn't everything. But you're probably wondering how we can judge quality if the movies aren't out yet. Seems impossible. But between the promotional material and early screenings, both movies have given us a little taste. On June 19th, the lucky few got to see the first 30 minutes of Superman, and the reactions were super positive. Resident Justice said it feels like an episode of the animated series, with a Silver Age tone. William Smith called it a generational moment and a home run, with great acting and solid special effects. Good Joe said you have to see it in IMAX, because the flying scenes are amazing. And a friend of Robert Burnett said they really loved it.
Thanks for the good news.
Of course, we shouldn't take those comments too seriously, since they're coming from people who were invited to a fan event. It'd be pretty weird for them to say anything negative, because that might mean they don't get invited again. And it wouldn't be the first time early DC screenings gave weird results. I still remember when The Flash got the best test scores since The Dark Knight, and we all saw how that turned out. It was pure bait. We could say the same thing about some of the Fantastic Four reactions. Marvel's been keeping a tight lid on leaks for their recent movies, and they've basically cut off the insiders. So all we've got is feedback from one fan who went to a special screening. This person said the movie moves at a good pace, Galactus looks awesome, and the group's chemistry is solid. There was even an employee asking people what they thought after the screening, and apparently a lot of folks gave it really high scores. But there was also one guy nearby who said the movie was mid. Then the usual clickbait crew, like Jeff Snyder, My Time to Shine Hello, and Daniel RPK, jumped all over that part and built a whole negative narrative around the movie just to boost their engagement. They even tweeted that people were yelling mid during the credits, which just isn't true. Jeff Snyder went so far as to claim his sources said the whole thing was a disaster, but we know that's a lie because he was just basing it off that one user's comment. Even so, if we're just going by early reactions from fans, Superman seems to be looking a little better, but we've got to take a more serious look. Let's break down all the promo material to figure out who's actually got the edge. Both movies have a classic, uplifting tone with bright, colorful visuals, and it looks like most of the characters are going to stick close to their comic designs. Superman is moving away from the vibe of Man of Steel, which probably won't sit well with Snyder fans, but it's leaning more toward the Christopher Reeve version, something that could click more with general audiences. Also, the movie's packed with characters to give it that crossover big event feel, which is exactly the kind of thing people want to see in theaters post-pandemic. The visuals look spot on, and James Gunn seems to be using Superman's powers in creative new ways. He's even taking cues from Top Gun Maverick for the flying scenes. The only shot that felt a bit off was the one with the crazy eyes, but Gunn confirmed he cut that from the final version, so no worries there. Meanwhile, Fantastic Four has a retro-futuristic vibe because it's set in another universe. That means it's going to have a look that's totally different from any other superhero movie we've seen so far. That could really stand out, and it looks like Galactus is finally getting a proper live-action adaptation. But even though the whole planet's at risk from this world-devouring threat, the story feels a lot more contained and personal than Superman. There are fewer characters, and the tone of the movie doesn't really feel all that epic. That's not a bad thing though, because what makes the Fantastic Four special is seeing them interact as a family. All the teasers show that the cast has great chemistry, like when Johnny tells Reed he finally respects him, or when he asks Ben to say his classic catchphrase. Moments like those can make people fall in love with these characters and turn them into new MCU favorites. But so far, we haven't seen much of them in action. Maybe Marvel's saving the good stuff for the movie, and they don't want to spoil everything in the trailers, like Superman did. But so far, Johnny's the only one who really uses his powers a few times. The effects look good, but nothing has wowed me the way Superman's flying scenes have. So here's where things stand. It looks like Superman is going to deliver better fight scenes, make more creative use of everyone's powers, and go for a much more epic tone. On the other hand, Fantastic Four might have more developed, interesting characters and a stronger villain. The thing is, with Fantastic Four, all of that is just potential. We're only going off a couple of lines from the trailers. Maybe it's a little unfair and I'll regret it in 2 weeks, but for now, the point for quality goes to Superman. That gives us a final score of 3 points for Superman and 2 for Fantastic Four, so Superman is looking like it'll be the best superhero movie of the year and probably probably the biggest box office hit too. The first trailer pulled in over 250 million views in its first 24 hours. And according to Fandango, the movie sold more tickets on its first day than any other release this year. But Superman does have one issue. There are already 4 confirmed villains, and that usually doesn't go too well in superhero movies. We've all seen what happened with Spider-Man 3 and The Amazing Spider-Man 2. So the real question is if James Gunn can actually pull off a movie with this many villains. I'll answer that in this video.
Bye-bye for now.